Okay, so I'm recording. So again, thank you everyone for joining. We're going to start now. It's about 7:02 Eastern Time. Again, this is a discussion on LGBTQ plus. We're also going to be discussing Black Lives Matter. A lot has gone on, so we just want to. I want to put everything together. Obviously, it's June, so it is Pride Month, but it's supposed to be a happy month, but obviously a lot has gone on, and it's to me we're not at that point to really be happy, but we can celebrate it because the LGBTQ community has been through a lot, but we also want to support and definitely help the Black Lives Matter movement. So again, I have panelists Katrina Kibben, LaTonya Wilkins, and Brian Klecatsky. I got it, Brian? I got it wrong still.
Great job.
Okay, good. Okay. So again, I'm Anthony Paradiso. I'll be moderating. This is me and my background. Just mainly what I've been doing here is this is my third webinar virtually. I had two prior ones that really focused on COVID-19 and how it had an impact on diversity and inclusion. I started my own company last year, AllThingzAP, where it's a diversity inclusion consulting firm. And really my main thing is I want to embrace an inclusive environment so everyone really could be their full authentic self. And I want to get to my my panel and have them tell me about themselves, their contact info, so afterwards they can you can reach out to them personally and whatnot. So let's go to actually about me. Sorry about this. Just a few things about me. I'm going to go right to my vulnerability. One vulnerability that I have is a speech impediment. I do have a stutter sometimes when I get a little nervous or if I get hot or whatever it is. So if you notice I have a little stutter, it's just what I have. So it's my vulnerability that I'm sharing. I have many other ones, but that's one in particular. So I'm going to go to Katrina. So Katrina, if you can, just tell us a little about yourself and also make sure you just give us your contact info too.
Yeah, so my name is Katrina Kibben, and if you spell my name correctly, you will find me because I am the only Katrina Kibben in the whole world. And that is a blessing and a curse. Someone who also comes up is a naval preacher. We can talk about that some other time. So I run a company called 3 Ears Media, named after 2 dogs with 4 ears. Again, story for another time. But at 3 Ears Media, we teach recruiters to write. And the reason that I got into that field is because we all know that hiring is really hard. And if I asked every single person on this call why hiring is hard, you'd probably tell me something different. But the real truth, right, is the fact that we can't predict anything. The fact that we work with the most unpredictable variable in the whole world, people. The one thing you can control is how you ask. So at 3 Ears Media, we teach you to ask, to write better emails, to write better job postings. And I am a lesbian, and I'm excited to be a part of this conversation and to have honest and real talk about where we need to be as a company and as a country.
Thank you. And your contact info.
Yeah, so I'm Katrina at 3 Ears Media. It's probably even easier if you go to 3earsmedia.com. My calendar is actually right there. You can book time with me if you want.
Awesome. Thank you, Katrina. And next, LaTonya, if you can.
Hi, I'm LaTonya Wilkins, and I don't know why it says microphone issue on the front screen, but maybe that's just part of the graphics.
Oh, it's not.
So, Katrina, I know you said company before you said country, and so I think that was a Freudian slip in the state of where we are right now. But so I run a company called The Change Coaches, LLC. I'm an executive coach. I also do DEI work at the executive level, mainly road mapping and DEI design thinking. I also I'm a speaker. So I do a lot with underrepresented groups, and I'm writing a book called Leading Below the Surface. And so it'll be out in the spring. I'm really excited about that, just making more time for that. And I am a queer woman, and I'm excited to be here today talking about 2 issues that are obviously unavoidable for me. So looking forward to the conversation, and thank you all for coming. And you can see my contact information. My website's LaTonyaWilkins.com, or you can just connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm on there pretty regularly.
Thank you so much. And then Brian.
Good evening, everybody. Pleasure to be here with you, Anthony, and the other panelists, Katrina and LaTonya. It's an exciting time despite all of the unrest that we're experiencing. I am a former marketer turned diversity, equity, and inclusion leader within the corporate space. I've also done some nonprofit work for the LGBT community. I live in suburban Connecticut, about 1 hour from New York City. In my corporate roles, I've worked in different industries, hospitality, retail, fashion, insurance, as well as food manufacturing and consumer packaged goods. I consider myself a change agent, but I'm humbled to say that as a practitioner, it's truly that the work is ever emerging in the context that we live in. So while I identify as a cisgender white male, my pronouns he, him, his, I also know that amplifying underrepresented voices has been a part of my work, and now more than ever, it's critical. And I'm also increasingly more curious about the intersectionality between the LGBT community and movement and that of the Black Lives Matter and other communities of color. So I'm excited to be here for the conversation. I can be reached through LinkedIn, and I'm going to send that in the chat to anybody who wants to grab it.
Thank you. And I also didn't mention too, I am also a gay cisgender male as well. I should have mentioned that before, but I mentioned it now. And my pronouns too are he, him, his as well. So I always do this right away. I usually do it either in this situation, the panel format, but I also do it in my other roles, my daily, in my full-time job and whatnot. We do a round check or a round robin to see how we're all doing. So I'm gonna just, for me personally, this is a mental health check. So I'm probably on the yellow green. I've been yellow for a while, and probably green back and forth with the yellow part. Just a lot of things going on. And I you know, with the recent events, it's been pretty hard. I mean, I'm a white male, so I can't even imagine what it is for a Black person, what they're going through right now. It's just it's been hard, and I'm sorry. So Katrina, so if you can, where do you fall right now? How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm probably in the green. I'm definitely at a place where like I want to burn it down. And I want to change things, and I'm mad that things aren't different. And yeah.
LaTonya?
I fluctuate between yellow and orange. I would say at the beginning of last week, I was a green. There were a lot of tears and a lot of conversations that I was encouraged by, but also were very difficult to have. So I'm happy where I'm at this week.
And Brian?
So I've been surfing the various range of colors here. I think the last time you hosted this, Anthony, I was a solid orange, but I am yellow today. And sort of echoing what LaTonya just shared last week, the beginning of the week, intense sadness. I think it's starting to turn more into activist energy, sort of mirroring what Katrina shared. But, you know, again, it's hard to separate what's going on relative to the racial injustices and the COVID-19 pandemic. So, you know, minute to minute, it could be, you know, green, but I generally live as an optimist, trying to also grow and learn from every experience. But today it's a solid yellow.
Okay. Well, thank you all for sharing that. So, as I said before, I hosted other webinars, and so what brought me for this webinar really, obviously, it is Pride Month. So I did want to discuss LGBTQ plus issues, but also due to recent events, I also want to also have a conversation surrounding Black Lives Matter. And before, my other two presentations they did surround the conversations around the crisis we face globally. You know, the conversations surrounding race, racism, color, gender, LGBTQ plus, disability. Those have been discussed in my prior webinars, but today primarily to be LGBTQ plus issues, and like I said, Black Lives Matter. So as I mentioned too, the emphasis on Gay Pride Month the last probably decade or two has been more of a fun. There's been parades and just shows and just fun, going to the bars and just hang out with your friends and just celebrating being a queer person. But obviously, a lot of things have happened in the last few weeks where it's kind of hard right now to celebrate. But really, right now, I want to just stand with the Black Lives Matter movement and go from there. So that's where we are now with this. So I found these illustrations. I like them. It's Black Lives Matter, Black LGBTQ lives matter, Black trans lives matter. I like the right picture too. It has the gay flag along with the transgender and along with the Black Lives Matter figure in it as well. And then there was a statement issued, or was longer than this. It's just a quote from the LGBTQ organizations, and it states, and you can see it too, but I just want to read it. It says, "We understand what it means to rise up and push back against a culture that tells us we are less than, that our lives don't matter. Today, we join together again to say Black Lives Matter and commit ourselves to the action those words require." Katrina and LaTonya and Brian, what do you, how do you feel about the words that the LGBTQ organizations put together?
I mean, from my perspective, it's true. It's hard, right? And I think this is the first time where we have taken what we've always thought of pride, right? And taken a step back, I think, instead of having this, I think as a community, it's time to take a step back from the celebration aspect and start to focus on the history and the activism that are so crucial to our existence and to equality, and to put our energy towards Black Lives Matter right now. That's kind of how I look at it.
Thank you. LaTonya, how about you?
Yeah, so there was a protest. There's been many protests in Chicago. I'm in Chicago. I don't know if I mentioned that to everybody, but there was a specific protest that was in my neighborhood and ended up drawing about over like 3,000 people. And they started in Boys Town in Chicago, and they did that on purpose. That was something very intentional. And then they marched up to Uptown, which, if you're familiar with Chicago, Boys Town is by Wrigley Field. It's a gay neighborhood, Halsted Street. And the marchers in that, they specifically did that because it's Pride Month. And they told the crowd, this is not a celebration. This is not a celebration. We need to march. This is not gay pride. And we're doing this here because, people of color were the ones that kind of kicked off, our movement, our LGBTQ movement. And it was a really amazing scene of solidarity in Chicago. The streets were filled, and we had LGBTQ folks and Black Lives Matter folks together. And so that's what this quote reminds me of. It's all about, getting that solidarity back that was started with Stonewall, right? I mean, we had Stonewall and then everybody kind of went their ways, right? And some people, once there's gay marriage, packed up their bags, they were gone. And then everybody else, there was still a struggle, especially with Black trans folks. So this is where I hope the queer community goes, because this is where we need to be.
Yeah, I 100% agree. Thank you, LaTonya. And Brian?
So I know there's been a lot of skepticism about sort of some of the overarching corporate statements that have been made. And again, I try not to condemn, I try to embrace the idea that diversity, equity, and inclusion work is a journey, and that sometimes the wake-up call comes in odd forms at odd times. And if the George Floyd atrocity was the thing that suddenly kind of woke some people up to the reality of what was going on for decades or hundreds of years, in fact, So, I think of it all as, there's this idea of performative activism, right? It's to show, but I think everything begins with an action step. And to this point, and echoing what the others have said, I think the fact that the LGBT movement organizations came together in solidarity is recognizing those things. LaTonya mentioned the idea of trans women of color and Black trans women who have been disproportionately impacted in society. They're killed and not talked about, and so it's important to see this intersection and to mobilize people who did sort of pack their bags and sort of fade into the suburban background after gay marriage equality was won, right? It's a call, as Jennifer Brown says, it's a calling in. So I think it's very poignant and essential right now.
Great, thank you. So for me, and each of us can either give our story of coming out, or or how it felt coming out, whatever how the panel wants to describe their coming out story. But mine was, I'm in my late 30s, and I came out in my mid 20s. So a large part of my life right now, I have lived secret. I've actually dated a female for 5 years when I was in high school into college. And I've been married now for 5 years with my husband. Actually, we got married the day after same-sex marriage was legalized. Not even that wasn't planned. That's just how it was. And it was actually great that the person that married us, she incorporated some of the ruling into our marriage. So it was really great. But it was hard. It's hard not being who you are for a quarter of your life. And like this quote that I indicated, really coming out, and it took a journey. It wasn't just I came out and like, oh, okay, here I am. I'm free and clear. I'm perfect, and I'm nowhere near perfect now. But it's a journey. It's a journey. Being who you are, when you can be your authentic self, is when you are your best. So with my company, AllThingzAP, I like embracing that, because I feel like even in organizations, when someone can be their authentic self, they're able to perform the best they can when they are who they are. So I hope that my story, and it's a lot more detailed than that, but I hope my story can help others, help them get to that point where they can come out or be their authentic self. And I guess, Katrina, how about you? What story do you want to share, or how did it feel coming out? Whatever it is that you want to share.
I mean, it wasn't magical for me. It wasn't a great lifetime story or anything like that. I grew up in an immigrant military family, and I came out twice, and I came out when I was 16 to my mom. And I remember I was sitting at my desk and I was sobbing, like just full on bawling. And I said to her, I don't want you to hate me, because that's how I thought about being gay, was that was a reason someone would hate me. And with that in my mind, I actually went back into the closet for another 7 years. And when I came back out, I was outed to my family because someone in my family said a very terrible slur at a holiday meal. And my mom said, well, be nice. Your niece is and she said it. And I was like, oh, okay. And honestly, to this day, I still don't have a great relationship with my family. And so I think that coming out stories are really powerful, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because I think coming out stories so often bind our community and bring us together, good, bad, and terribly awful, like my family can be.
Well, thank you, Katrina, for that. And LaTonya, how about you?
I guess I knew at a very young age, and I kind of went in and out. When I was, I guess, came out in my undergraduate years, and then when I started working in corporate America, I kind of went back in the closet. And I would say probably about 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, that's when I was completely out. And that's when my life really started, I guess, I will say. Everything was different. I was able to filter in and out everything around me, jobs, people, friends, everything. I will say when I was coming out, and why all this matters so much to me, is that there weren't a lot of people in the queer community that looked like me. There weren't a lot of communities out there. I grew up in Iowa, which is a unique childhood for a Black kid, especially in small town Iowa. And then we moved to Des Moines, Iowa, which is it's the capital. And so there are some, there's a Black community there, but it's not that big. And so there was no intersectionality, right? It was like you were Black or white, and there was nothing in between. There were no Black queers or anything like that. And so it's been pretty amazing over the last 10 years, really building that community. It's also, still crazy that we still have so many other prides, because, we have such a diverse queer community. Like, there's a Latin pride, there's a Black pride, there's like everything pride. So, so that's my story. I think it's nice to see that there's more people like me out there these days.
Thank you. And Brian, you too, if you can, Brian. And I have a question that we all could answer too after this, after Brian's story.
Sure. Yeah, I was going to say, I see Mary's question, so glad you're tracking. So thank you for sharing or all three of you actually, because Anthony, you kicked it off, sharing your coming out stories. And I guess I'm the elder in the group, because I think first came out over 30 years ago, and it wasn't always easy. And I did similar to Katrina. I tested the waters as a teenager, kind of was discovered because I wanted to take a boy to the prom, and my dad wasn't having anything to do with that. And so, I went underground for about another 7 years, and then ultimately got, sort of strength, wisdom, time, support, growth through college experience, and some freedom. And then it was a non-negotiable. But where I want to just emphasize relative to coming out, and I think my fellow panelists wouldn't find this surprising, but maybe some of our attendees, whereas people of color, for example, their skin identifies them right away. LGBT people who are not necessarily obvious, right? So whether it's in workplaces or in communities of faith or friend groups, recreational activities, we have to come out almost every day through every experience. But I think there's power in that, in the sense that you create space for others. And so, for me, I've had the privilege of being out in every working environment. Doesn't mean that I come out on the first day. It doesn't mean I come out in the interviewing process. But once I sort of establish, my safety boundaries, maybe I come out to a few close colleagues, and then I come out to a larger group. And then certainly my world pivoted when I started to do diversity and inclusion work full time. But even when I was doing it part-time, I launched an LGBT resource group in a Fortune 500 company. And then even the people I didn't know knew that I was an out gay man in the business place. So these things are just some defining moments. But echoing what you shared, Anthony, I found that I got more of my own truth and more of my own power in being able to say what was true for me, and as a result, make space for others. And, over a 7-year period, cultivating relationships across the corporate community, the LGBT platform became very empowering, right? So, but yeah, so that's like coming out personally, and then coming out professionally, and then coming out every day.
Yeah. No, you mentioned a few good points. Like for me, for instance, being a white male, I can go into a store and I'm not followed. I can hide my orientation, whereas someone else who is Black and is, or they're just Black and I'm queer, they're going to be a lot of times they're being followed, or so there is definitely a you know, a lot going on there. Yeah, and there's one thing, there's a question that Mary did ask, Mary Williams, thank you for asking the question about supporting those who are coming out. I mean, for me, it's really just supporting them. I mean, that's really what it comes down to, is supporting them, helping them. You can't force them to come out. You can't come out for them. It has to be their own journey. So I really, my main, you know, I would really emphasize and really support a person who's coming out. Again, don't force, you know, help them through the process. Brian or LaTonya or Katrina, how do you feel about, you know, how you could support others who are coming out?
The biggest thing from my perspective, Mary, is just around, I think there's one piece of me that wants you to just say, okay. Right? Like I have a partner. Okay. That's, I'm not looking for like you to come in with a flag and a t-shirt and be like, I'm your people. And I think the other side of it, as far as like what not to say, I think a lot of times, and this is my experience, so take it or leave it, but I think a lot of times people go to tokenisms next. They find you come out to them, and then, for example, I worked at an all-male company. They found out I was a lesbian, and then all of a sudden I was one of the boys. And they behaved in despicable ways around me because they thought I would just brush it off like one of the guys because I like girls too. Like, I honestly don't even know how they came to that conclusion. Or, I mean, just some of the generalizations that come right after that. I think that's on my what not to say. Don't make assumptions about me just because I've come out to you. The only assumption you can make at that point is that I trust you.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. LaTonya and Brian, anything else you want to the point of support of coming out?
I mean, I would just say, just continue to love the person like you do now. I mean, one of my anchors in my life has been my grandmother, and you know, I lost her earlier this year, and she always knew I was different, probably before I did. And when some of my family was judging me, I mean, my family has been, you know, they've transformed the way that they perceive me, and they're very accepting, but that was a journey. And my grandma was always just loving and complimenting what I was wearing, like, or what I was doing, or everything. She would always invite people in her house. She'd be like, bring your friends in. No, they're in the car, Grandma. Nope. Everybody comes in my house. And she'd offer them food. And I think that's what it is. It's like there's going to be so many areas of life where you judged or you feel like you don't fit in. But I think if you could just give that person love, I think it sounds cliche, but if you could just validate them, that goes a long way. And it's like what Katrina said, it's just treating them the same, you know, but also understanding that they're going to have challenges in life and being there for them at the same time.
Yeah. Brian?
Yeah, I agree with what Katrina and LaTonya offered. The other things that are occurring to me is this idea, and Mary, I don't know what your specific scenario is, but the idea that sometimes you might have a sense about somebody and know that they might be trying to get to that point of trusting and opening up. So I think a thing that you can do is sort of demonstrate, and, you know, not brick to the head, but that you are sort of an ally, or, you know, whether you have, you know, other LGBT identified friends, or you even talking about something that you read, or, you know, that you saw or experienced, you signal that you're a safe person that they could confide in by just opening up space that's not directly related to them. The other thing that occurs to me, and kind of like on a personal note, and I've had this happen to me in 2 situations at work where, as I shared before, coming out is a vulnerable act. It's a courageous act. And out of the 2 times that I'm thinking of, what happened was that when I basically, you know, maybe I'm working up the courage, and I'm ready to sort of confide in the person and say, by the way, I don't know if you know this or not about me, but I identify as a gay man and I live with my partner. And like the person, I think their intent is to make me feel comfortable, like it's no big deal. But what they say immediately is, oh, I knew that. And so in doing so, it becomes this thing where it just sort of discounts the fact that you just bared your soul. So it's almost like, again, having just a little bit of that self-filtering mechanism to just be like, oh, it's really, I feel honored that you shared with me. What else do you want to share? Or, how can I, be a friend? How can I be an ally? That kind of a thing. Just sort of signaling that you're there listening and supporting, I guess, is versus that sort of discounting sweep.
Oh my gosh. I think that is the worst possible response to, especially if your child,
anyway.
Yes, especially if your child comes out to you. I joke that there are 3 ways that every person responds when you come out. And this is probably a little like joke. No, we'll stick with it, okay? The first thing they say is, oh, I know. The second thing they say is, well, I have a gay blah, blah, blah.
And you must know them too.
Exactly. Or the third thing is, oh, okay, oh, okay, right? But those are, it's consistent. Every single time I come out, you get the exact same reactions. And I love that you brought up the, oh, I know, because I feel like that is so dismissive. Everyone on the call, let's just promise we're not going to respond to anyone coming out with, oh yeah. Right? No more.
It's happened to me too. Yeah, people told me, yeah, I know. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing.
Right? Well, because to me, it says that you don't recognize how big of a deal it is that I came out to you in the first place, or that I said it. You're not hearing it matter.
Exactly. And my next, go to my next slide. I didn't, while I was just looking just for material and just in discovery, I never knew this, but there's a person by the name of Bayard Rustin. Hope I'm pronouncing the last name right. Was it? Rustin? I never knew this at all. But it was just very interesting that this was a very high person that was, very close to Martin Luther King, who was also someone who was, a gay man. And from what I gather, he actually was out, but couldn't really, he had to. I guess he had to hide a portion of his life at times because of those times. So I just found it very interesting, and by all means, everyone could, you can always Google search and get a little more information. But I did find this to be very interesting.
Yeah, I read his biography and a few other things about him. Yeah, he was very instrumental in the March on Washington, in a lot of the big movements that we know about from the civil rights era. And the big reason why he was put in the second seat was because they wanted a face to the movement, and he was not willing to be closeted. He didn't want to live his life that way. And I have so much respect and honor his life and his work.
Oh, thank you. Actually, someone put it in the chat section.
Yeah, he's inspiration. Yeah, Katrina, that's exactly how I recall it as being. That was where, I guess, aside from his being a gay man, and living his truth, and also probably being a Black gay man, it was just like he had to suppress his identities, and play sort of, a backup role to empower the movement. So it's interesting. It's powerful. I was just trying to look up a quote I just read from James Baldwin earlier today, but haven't put my hands on it yet.
So I just wanted to share that. And then, as everyone knows here, the same-sex marriage, it was passed on June 26, 2015. And like I said, I got married on June 27th of that year. So it was obviously very powerful. And and this was a part of in the actual writing. This is what Justice Kennedy, in a part of his in his opinion, or the five justices in their opinion, this is what they wrote. And I just want to kind of, how did you all feel, Katrina, LaTonya, and Brian, when this happened? Well, I'm sure obviously it was joy, obviously, but was there, how would you describe in a few words how it felt for you to see this pass?
Yeah, so I think there's two aspects. And so when I was thinking about this, the first thing that I thought about actually was all of the things that marriage allowed that so many people, I think, forget. So when people talk about gay marriage, they're like, ooh, cakes, party, woo, you got married. But they don't talk about the fact that couples who were married and lived in states that did not recognize their marriage couldn't get divorced. That we weren't on health insurance plans because the company, they didn't recognize that partnership. They didn't have access to their assets. And so often, I don't think we talk enough about the full breadth of what this meant, even past marriage. But for me, it was really powerful because it was the first time that I felt really seen at work, because actually my manager called me, and he was in San Francisco when it happened. And he said to me, this is history. You can't miss this. Pride is tomorrow. This is crazy, guys. Pride is tomorrow. I'm going to fly you out here right now, and you need to be here. I wrote about this actually this week on my blog, about why pride means so much to me. And I told this story, and it's because that was the first time in my life, and he was a straight white man, and he understood that this was history and this would change my whole life. And he said it out loud, and he invested in me experiencing that. And I think that's what I remember most, is really, honestly, what happened at work, also this bigger, broad impact.
No, yeah, it was definitely a moving day. And like I said, it was, for me, it was just like, I couldn't believe the day after getting married. It was just it was just like, oh, wow. And then people were asking me, did you plan that? And I'm like, well, no, I mean, I couldn't have planned that. I mean, we had to save a date, there's no way of planning that. It's just, for everyone, obviously, it means a lot. It was just, it was very cool that happened the day before, for me at least. And just, I'm going to move on a little bit because I want to get into other topics. But as everyone knows too, Stonewall was the uprising for the LGBTQ plus community. So LaTonya, if you want to just kind of give your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's big about this is it's it's funny because I've had so many crazy conversations around rioting and protests, and people trying to tell us the best way that we should riot or mourn, or that we should protest. And people did the same thing with Colin Kaepernick. They said, well, you can't do that. You got to get off your knee. If you're going to do this, these are the things you need to do. But it's been nice to remind folks that Stonewall was a riot, and it was a riot against police brutality, because we forget. And while we're trying to judge everything that's going on, and I'm not saying I'm an advocate for rioting, but it's part of history, right? It's part of how things get done, and you have to sit back as an observer and understand that. And the other big thing about Stonewall that I love that no one really ever talks about is it was really erupted by two trans women of color. And they were the ones that kind of got the crowd riled up, and started throwing the bottles, started throwing the bricks. They got everything going. And again, that's something that is inconvenient, and we just don't talk about that enough. And when we talk about queer history, when we talk about Pride Month, but without them, we wouldn't be here. And so yeah, I think Stonewall is definitely a demonstration around what happens when you finally are fed up and you fight back.
Yeah, and were you talking about Marsha Johnson?
Yeah. Yep.
as well. Yeah, which leads into my
Sylvia
next.
Rivera.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was the the main person that actually started everything. So yeah, that was, and there's a few pictures of her up there. Anything else that Brian or Katrina you want to add to the to Stonewall at all?
I love that you brought up that Stonewall was a riot against police brutality. I think so many people forget that. They don't know that. I mean, how many people on here, and you can put this in the chat, know that the police actually used to go into bars in New York City, into gay bars, and just arrest and beat every single gay person in there. Like, if you haven't taken the time to read and understand this, it was never just it was a riot. And because that, yeah, I'm surprised that more people don't know that, and haven't read up on this history.
No, I agree. It's something that we all need. Yeah, we need to. I mean, even myself, I have to include myself. I need to read up more on it. And
Tinderbox,
it's
excellent book.
What's that?
Tinderbox.
I will note that. And then on to the next thing, and this was it was a recent I went over the story with Colin Kaepernick, but there was a recent statement issued by the commissioner for the NFL, Roger Goodell. As I'm sure all of you have heard the statement. Katrina, LaTonya, and Brian, how do you feel the statement was, and do you think there was more needed?
Too little, too late.
Agreed. Completely.
Yeah. And there was no, I mean, there could have been an apology too. There really was no apology in it. But yeah, too little, too late. Yeah, I could. Brian?
Well, on a personal note, I agree in terms of too little, too late. But what it stirs up for me is, all the pushback that this guy, has gotten, which has been career limiting for him by taking a stand. And then I even think about members of my own extended family that, have boycotted and sworn they will never buy another product from Nike because of the support and endorsements, supporting him. It's a fascinating way to, see how people, react and respond. Yeah, and I even see in an open letter that a diversity, equity, inclusion leader that is in my network wrote about the grief that she feels. And it was a series of her grief expressions about what's happening. But it was the idea that, the NFL wasn't, again, if you think about riots, activism, and the movement, it's sort of like how to mobilize people to take action to thwart, misinformation and misbehavior on the parts of these enterprises sooner, right? So, but the same way you wish it had been done different, they become catalysts. So, I try to always look at the glass half full, even when it sucks,
I guess from my perspective, they ruined his career. They ruined, right? And this is civil disobedience at its minimum. This is barely disobedience. And the fact that it took all of this to have them admit that it was never about their flag, and frankly, they didn't want to make anyone mad. And now that they think everyone's going to be on their side, they're willing to say something. That's not what this is about. And I think about it in a more broad spectrum because I work in the world of HR and recruiting as well, that I want to make sure that other people who are exercising their right to protest right now are not being impacted in their careers. And that they're able to survive and thrive when they stand up and speak out on behalf of Black lives.
Definitely. Thank you all. Yeah, when I saw the statement, I agree with Tanya too. It's too little, too late. I mean, it definitely is.
Yeah, I would like to hear what the audience thinks too around what he said, and because I think hearing from you as well. But it's when this came out, it was the same day I think as Drew Brees said that Colin Kaepernick should not be in the NFL. So it's just I just don't know what's real anymore. I mean, this again,
Yeah.
Brian, you mentioned the PR and like how a lot of organizations are riding that PR wave, and I think the NFL is doing just that.
So you don't think it was authentic at all? You thought it was just a PR stunt?
Yeah.
A consultant told him to write that. There's no part of me that believes that Roger Goodell woke up some morning and was like, let's
all
do
of a sudden
statement.
just
This is a big, important part of our community, and I'm going to stand up. Today, I'm standing up. Bull. I'm not going to say it, but bull.
It's okay. It's not rated.
It's bullshit. It's such bullshit.
Yeah, I'm putting the question there too in the chat box too. It's okay. Be your authentic self, Katrina. Be you. As people are typing, I'm going to go on to the next slide, and then obviously this leads into most recent events with George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. So I'm sorry if I'm swiping. I just wanted to show some slides. Obviously, these are horrific moments. When I saw the George Floyd incident, I couldn't even. It was a lot. So Katrina, LaTonya, Brian, how did you all watch it? What was going through your head when this all happened?
Well, I don't watch videos of murder, and it's something. Black Lives Matter has been something we've been enduring for many years, 400 years, really, killing and murders of Black people. And so I would like to know from the panelists, like, why this one stuck out to you the most, or why do you think this one's sticking out to the world the most? Because for us, it's been every few months. I mean, Mount Aubrey, I run outside, and so what about this one changed things?
Yeah, I think it had a lot to do with COVID-19 also. I don't know if it would have been as it is now if we weren't in this pandemic. I mean, I'm not saying it should have, but I don't know if it would have been as I wouldn't know if there have been as many protests now because of COVID-19. I think that had a big part of it. Katrina, Brian, what do you both feel?
Well, I think I agree with you. The pandemic and the psychological, conditions at large possibly, were one of the reasons why it was received on a more deep level, because maybe there was collective grief, loss, the uncertainty that was already permeating. We know that there was a lot of conversation around how it was, the pandemic is disproportionately impacting communities of color. But I also think that, and I echo LaTonya's perspective of not watching murder, but there's been a lot of conversation around how now technology has become an accountability measure. And I know there have been other things that have been caught on video, but this was undeniable, and there was no way to unsee it, right? So I think it was a confluence of things, but I think all of a sudden that's why it became, the catalyzing moment. I also think that there's a lot going on in the geopolitical atmosphere that has people really reacting to some, poor judgment, and somebody who's really campaigning on a divisive platform, right? So it's I think that's why it became a pivotal moment. So that's what I'm.
Well, while you're talking to, I'm just reading other in the chats. There's been other members in the chat have had struggles for years with conversations. I'm not sure if the panel has seen that the last two comments, the last three. But
yeah, I agree with Joel. That's sort of what I was trying to articulate, basically.
Yeah. I think, and I saw what Kel said, and I think that was part of it. I'm with LaTonya. I don't watch videos of murders. I honestly, and I want to say also, you're right. I've been mad for a really long time. I think that there were people who thought it was something separate from them. And what I heard from people who felt like, or at least that what they've come to me and said, was that hearing him call out for his mother was like a call into the soul of this country. And I know a lot of mothers, specifically white mothers, who came to me and said that is echoing. And so I definitely, I know that access is changing how we respond. I know that this pandemic is changing how we collectively as humans respond to tragedy. And I'm thankful whatever condition created that made people stand the hell up, because sitting quietly is killing Black people, and it's not okay.
Yeah, and I have to so I'm also seeing the comments too. Other people are saying COVID-19. I also do agree with Brian. I think Brian mentioned the current administration. I do think that it was a big impact too. I don't know if it was a different administration, if it would have been as it is now, but obviously the administration or Trump's administration is undoubtedly divisive, and people are just sick of it. And I think this was the final straw. I mean, it should have taken years and years ago, but I mean, it's taken so long. I actually joined my first protest. It was locally over the past weekend in my town. It was just we all stood in line, 6 feet apart, and we were on a main street. We had our signs, and it felt very good to do. I'm trying to, by holding these panels, and I'm trying to hold these conversations so we can help each other out and somehow get through this. I think before, I don't think I mentioned it here, but I think before when the panel was discussing everything before everything went live, I was sharing that, we can have all the diversity inclusion initiatives we want, but really until we start having these conversations, these real tough conversations, we're really not going to get anywhere until we do what we are doing now. So I'm hoping that this discussion we're having today is helping. I'm hoping that the protests help. Brian, you were going to say something, Brian? I wasn't sure. You raised your hand. I wasn't sure if you were raising your hand or.
Oh, I'm just thinking about one of the things, again, having done diversity, equity, inclusion work in Fortune 500 companies for 14 plus years, is that I'll tell one on myself. I would say 50% of that time I could navigate. Obviously my point of entry was through the LGBT space, right? And that's highly intersectional because it can race, ethnicity, gender, differently abled, etc. It can cut across the spectrum. So there's a little bit of a unification of overlap. But where I was really going was this notion of, until now, a lot of companies, at least the ones that I've had direct experience and also conversations with practitioners, people don't want to name what's really going on, right? Systemic, racism, white privilege. So if there's anything that's breaking open aside from the immediate response to George Floyd's murder, is this notion of actually being able to name what's behind it so that we can actually start to have real conversations versus talking about it more about inclusion or belonging. And it's sort of like we wanted to fix the problem without ever naming the problem. So I see that as a big opening. So even these companies that are being called out for their PR statements and stuff, if there's any action that follows, they can't now sort of suddenly say, well, we don't talk about, you know, we don't not talk about racism now that we've declared that it's a thing. You know, I also think there's something heartening in the evolving of the work, because the millennial generation is much more actively involved in terms of being forces for positive change and intolerant, right? They want to be purpose driven. They want to, you know, so it gives me hope for the future. But I also think that that's also part of why I see some of the comments around, you know, how come white people are finally stepping into this? But I think it has to do with the generational component as well.
Definitely. Thank you all. I know we're almost at end time. I just, there were a few more slides. I don't want to ignore. If we could just maybe spend maybe extra 2 minutes or so. And obviously there was the Breonna Taylor situation as well. That incident was awful. They're all awful. I don't know really. I keep saying the word awful. I guess maybe there's a part of me that isn't comfortable talking about it, and I don't know what else to do. I mean, I know, again, having these panels and all of this, but I just hope this stops. And I mean, for me, I'm just going to use my privilege that I have to help the Black Lives Matter movement and to help other marginalized groups as best as I can. So if anyone has any suggestions, you can put in the chat box, you can email me, let me know how I can help, and I'll be there. And as far as we also have the Pulse anniversary coming up. I know we're almost end of time. I know Brian was going to discuss this briefly. Brian, is anyone to mention on the Pulse? I mean, we have some verbiage on here.
Yeah, the only two things I'll say quickly is that it's 2 days from now is the anniversary. So it's always just, again, this was one of those defining moments where, in the context of celebration and pride and all the, you know, the positive progress we had made, there was this atrocious thing. And I believe the statistic is that slightly over 90% of those who were victimized or killed were people of color. And I think 20 to 25% of those were African American and Black, or, you know, racially Black, Hispanic, Latino folks.
Yep.
So again, it's just another one of these events. And I think at the time that was the biggest sort of mass killing on American soil, right? So it's just, again, it's a pause and reflect moment of how long does this keep going on? How many more messages? And to just presence that it's an anniversary, and it, you know, now that we're dealing with pandemics and we're dealing with the matters of today, you know, these lives lost and the impact, you know, shouldn't be overlooked. So that was my point.
Thank you. And then there will be, I don't know the exact website, but if you look on Google, there will be a virtual anniversary regarding Pulse. They're going to go, I think, over each victim's stories. Again, I don't know the exact site, but that is going to be on for the actual anniversary, which I think it's this Friday, Brian. So this Friday, this Friday.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I know that other discussions on anti-Blackness want to be discussed, and this is the last slide before we wrap up. But there was also the Christian Cooper incident. Luckily, thankfully, it didn't lead to another murder. Thankfully, panel, how did you feel about this incident?
We both just started.
Yeah.
It's happened to me before. I mean,
It has.
I mean, it's there's times that I don't even talk back because I know someone's going to call the police. And if they call the police, then that's what's going to happen. The police are going to come, and I'm going to be the person that has the burden, that has to prove that I didn't do anything wrong. And so I'm so glad this was caught on camera, because this happens to Black people every single day. And I will tell you that I was talking to a colleague the other day, and I do have hope, because she told me she's probably a white woman in her 50s, and she said, you know, I'm really sorry. I had no idea your life was different than mine. I had no idea that you have to think about, you know, going to a park. I had no idea you have to think about, you know, getting pulled over, or I had no idea you think about running. I just thought everybody was the same. And, you know, if it takes all this, fine. But, you know, I was actually shocked that someone didn't know that. But I guess at least we're hopefully turning a page, because I think the conversations are the start of it. And having conversations about this, that you can't go birdwatch without, you know, being threatened. And he was minding his own business. And this happens all the time.
Yeah. Katrina, Brian? Yeah, it's really, yeah, it's really nothing. Yeah, it's gotta stop. I mean, it's just, it has to. Well, I hope, I know I've seen a lot of comments here. I know, I hope that this webinar was helpful. I was trying my best to intersect both LGBTQ plus community along with Black Lives Matter. I hope I successfully did that. I tried. I know people on the comments I'm seeing the comments that people want to see more conversations around it. You know, we can continue the conversations. Really, everyone you have all our contact information. As I actually go on, I'm gonna I've had prior panels, so I just keep adding the links. Katrina, your email is at 3earsmedia.com, right?
Yep. You can book a meeting with me right there. You don't even have to send an email.
Perfect. Okay. And then Brian, your LinkedIn is in there. And then LaTonya Wilkins, you're also in there as well for to go online for a web search. And then again, I want to thank the panel. Thank you so much. And also, again, so everyone, Katrina, LaTonya, Brian, you all provide your information in the chat box, right?
Yes.
Okay, so yeah, this is how we're gonna do it. We'll continue the conversations. I'm also, I'll look into having another webinar in the upcoming weeks to keep the conversation going. Oh, I hear a dog. But be well, be safe. Thank everyone. My information is over here. Any questions, thoughts about this, please let me know. I want to help. We all, the whole panel wants to help as best as we can. Again, thank you, everybody. Katrina, LaTonya, Brian, you want to add any last thoughts?
No. Thanks for having it.
Yeah.
No problem. Thank you.
Conversation. You know, we could go on for a couple more hours. So.
Oh, of course. No, we could definitely.
It's great.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you all. Be safe and have a great night.
Take care. Thank you. Are we out, Anthony? I guess everybody else logged off. Good night.